welcome to a special interview for The Wire. How worrying are the coronavirus mutant strains spreading in India? How effectively is India doing genome sequencing? And what are the answers to critical questions that are now being asked both about Covaxin as well as Covishield? Those are three critical issues that I shall raise today with the director of the Trivedi School of Biosciences at Ashoka University and India's foremost virologist, Shahid Jameel. Professor Jameel, let's start with the double mutant strain found in Maharashtra. What can you tell me about the two mutations?
Well, the double mutation that has been seen has two individual mutations. The first one, which is called L452R, was first discovered in Denmark in the minks, and then in humans, it was first seen in California. And that was linked to some sort of a surge in California. The other mutation is something called E484Q, a similar mutation, not identical, but similar mutation called E484K, which is also nicknamed EEK, has been found in both the South African variant as well as the Brazil variant. And it is thought that this mutation reduces the effect of antibodies that have been developed either from a prior infection or from vaccination. So those are the two mutations that have come together.
So what you're saying is one mutation has similarities to the mutation found in Denmark and California, which is a more infectious mutation. Therefore, it's possible it will spread a lot faster. The second mutation has some similarities to mutations found in South Africa and Brazil, which are more resistant, in particular, I believe, to the AstraZeneca vaccine. Therefore, it may be more difficult to handle.
Well, it's not just the AstraZeneca vaccine, it's also to the Novavax vaccine that underwent trial in South Africa. It's also to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was trialed in South Africa. And both of these vaccines in the trial showed lower efficacy of the same vaccine in South Africa compared to UK or US.
So then this combination of two mutations is particularly concerning and worrying, isn't it?
It is something to worry about, yes.
Now,
yes.
Officially, the government has confirmed that 15 to 20% of the samples from Maharashtra sent for genome sequencing are of the double mutant variety. Unofficially, it's being said that in fact, the number or percentage of samples from Maharashtra that have shown the double mutant variety could be as high as 60%, but that's unofficial. How worrying is this? Does it suggest to you that the double mutant is responsible for a significant proportion of the surge in Maharashtra?
It is possible, and it is also natural that the double mutant, simply because of the nature of the two mutations in it, is likely to increase with time in not just Maharashtra, but in other places as well. Now, NCDC is given the task of correlating the genome sequencing data with epidemiology on the ground. They are working on it. They haven't finished the job yet, but it is worrisome. And just as somebody who understands the virus movement a little better than the average person, I would say that this is worrisome. And in time, the percent of double mutation is likely to increase.
Tell me something. It is the job of the NCDC to do epidemiological service to correlate the genome sequencing with the situation on the ground. Is it taking inordinately long? Shouldn't this correlation have been done by now? After all, this double mutant was first suspected in Amaravati in Ankola 6-7 weeks ago. I'm judging by what Maharashtra doctors were saying openly on television at the time.
Right. Yeah, so my understanding of the situation is that uh, the health staff coming from the state, which is on the ground, which is supposed to be doing all this, is facing some challenges. And because of that, NCDC is facing some challenges. But I think they are on the job, and hopefully soon we will have an answer.
When you say NCDC is facing challenges because the health staff on the ground are facing challenges, what sort of challenges are these? Do you have any sense?
Well, I think it's both personnel challenges. It's also, personnel not adequately trained at the ground level. Those, I think, are the challenges. I mean, just to give you an example, the state staff sends samples for sequencing to the sequencing labs, and often they will send, let's say, 100 samples from the same apartment building or from the same region. And that makes it very difficult to say whether something is really spreading in the population or is it just localized to that cluster. So that's just one example. Yeah.
I take your point. If you're going to send samples, they should be from a fairly widespread area so you can judge whether it's spreading. 100 samples from the same building serves no purpose. But that points to the earlier point you made about staff. You're suggesting that NCDC is short staffed, which is why these epidemiological surveys are not happening quickly enough. And secondly, you're also saying that the staff may not be adequately trained, which is one reason why they're sending 100 samples from one single location rather than a geographical spread.
Yeah, I think everyone is challenged right now because of the intensity of what is happening. So I do sympathize with them, but yes, we have to rectify that.
No doubt, Professor Jameel, people are challenged because the situation is once again approaching a crisis point. But these are people who are trained to do work under challenging and difficult circumstances. Britain carried out
Yeah.
extensive genome sequencing and epidemiological surveys to correlate the genome sequencing with the population rapidly, quickly. Shouldn't we be doing it at least at similar levels of speed?
Certainly, we should be doing that, and I'm hopeful that in the days to come, this alignment will be proper.
So the position today is that until the epidemiological survey is done to connect the double mutant found in Maharashtra with the situation on the ground, we can neither say with confidence that the double mutant is the cause of the surge in Maharashtra, nor can we say it's unconnected. We simply don't know because that essential work has not been done.
Yes, that is a correct assessment of things. We can neither say this way or that, but what we can say is that the same methods that protect us against the original virus also protect us against the mutants, and that is COVID appropriate behavior.
Absolutely.
So,
I
so
want to
whether the mutant is linked to the surge or not is actually something of academic interest.
Well, more than that, I'm interrupting you. It's more than that because if the mutant is both increase in infectiousness and also more
Right.
resistant to vaccine, it's more than an academic interest. It actually means the second surge will be a lot worse. That's why I want to pick up on that last point you made. At the moment, you said, in the absence of that essential epidemiological work, linking
Mhm.
the double mutant to the situation on the ground, we just don't know whether the mutant is the cause of the surge in Maharashtra or whether that's not the case. But on Tuesday, just 3 days ago, the head of the ICMR, Dr. Balram Bhargav, at the government's press conference, categorically said there was no connection between the double mutant in Maharashtra and the surge in Maharashtra. Now, if that epidemiological work has not been done, how can Dr. Bhargav say this?
Well, then Dr. Bhargav must be privy to information that I am not. So I can't really comment on that.
But it does
But
suggest, doesn't it, Dr.
but what is very clear with the rising numbers, that we are looking at a fairly intense second wave. If you look at the numbers, from 10 million cases to 11 million cases, we went in 66 days. From 11 million to 12 million, it took us only 34 days to do it. We had 11,000 cases in mid-February. Today, the numbers, well, yesterday's numbers, April 1st numbers are 81,400 cases. We are increasing at a very, very rapid rate. And Maharashtra is pulling roughly 50 to 60% of these numbers.
Just to come back to Dr. Bhargav, because he is the head of the ICMR, when he holds press conferences, people take what he says at face value. He is supposed to be an authority on the subject. If he's giving a categoric assurance that the double mutant found in Maharashtra is not responsible for the surge in Maharashtra, and yet that necessary epidemiological work is not known to us, and it's possible it may not even have been done, then that assurance becomes questionable, doesn't it? It's not to be taken at face value. It needs to be backed up, but that backup information is missing.
Well, the same thing that I'm telling you was also said by the Ministry of Health when it had a press conference on the 24th of March, where they talked about the genome sequencing effort and revealed that there is a double mutant that is circulating at 15 to 20%. As far as my information is concerned, that situation on the ground hasn't changed.
Okay. One more question before I move to Punjab, which is a somewhat different situation. You are, as I said in the introduction, widely regarded as India's top virologist. What's your hunch? I know the necessary epidemiological work hasn't happened. It's happening probably far too slowly, but what's your hunch? Do you believe this double mutant is likely to be one of the main causes of the surge in Maharashtra, or is that unlikely? What's your hunch?
My hunch, based on the way these mutants have behaved elsewhere, and my hunch based on the type of changes these mutations bring to the virus, I am worried that this surge is linked to that. And I am worried that this surge is going to get a lot worse.
Well, that's very clear. Your hunch is that the surge in Maharashtra is linked to the double mutant and it will get a lot worse.
I just said that it is my hunch. I'm not backing it up with any data. I don't have any data to back it.
Let's just sum up what we've discussed with regard to Maharashtra before we turn to Punjab, which is a slightly different situation. We have a double mutant in Maharashtra. The government has itself confirmed that 15 to 20% of the samples from Maharashtra sent for genome testing are of the double mutant variety. Unofficially, it's being said that in fact 60% of the samples genome sequenced by the NCDC from Maharashtra could be of the double mutant variety. You said one of the mutations is similar to that found in California and Denmark. It's more infectious. The other one is similar to that found in South Africa or Brazil. It is more resistant, not just to AstraZeneca, but to Johnson & Johnson and Novavax. And together, your hunch is that this double mutation is probably responsible and linked to the surge in Maharashtra, and the surge could get a lot worse. Let's now come to the situation in Punjab, which is a little different. The state government there has itself officially confirmed that 81% of samples sent from Punjab for genome sequencing, out of some 450 samples, have turned out to be linked to the UK variant. Does that mean that the UK variant is clearly the cause of the surge in Punjab?
Yes, it appears so. The UK variant was initially found only in travelers. Then it was found in contacts of travelers. And now it is largely in the community from multiple districts in Punjab. So the only logical explanation for the surge in Punjab is that the UK variant is possibly linked to it.
Tell me something. You said earlier in that answer that the UK variant is now in the community. If 81% of samples from Punjab are tested and found to be the UK variant. Does that suggest the UK variant in Punjab has achieved or reached community levels of spread?
Yes, that's what those numbers suggest.
So that is then particularly worrying, isn't it? The UK variant is at community level spreading in one state, at least in India.
Yeah. So, but before we go forward on the UK variant, there are a couple of things about the UK variant. Yes, in UK it was shown to spread about 20 to 50% faster than the original virus, but there was apparently no increase in the virulence. So it was not like the virus was killing more people. On the other hand, percentages often hide absolute numbers. So if let's say the variant is spreading 50% better, and it is still the case fatality rate is still the same, but it is there then putting more people in hospital and more numbers of people would be dying. So let's not just go with the case fatality ratios. Absolute numbers are important.
That's a very important point you're making. Not only is the UK variant possibly as much as 50% more infectious, but when a variant is more infectious, more people fall ill, more people go to hospital, and more people sadly die. In percentage terms, it may not be greater, but in absolute terms, the numbers falling ill and the numbers dying will grow. Tell me something, if the variant is now spreading at community level in Punjab, can we contain it within the borders of that state? Or will it clearly leak into other bordering states as well and become an equally serious problem there in time?
Now, how do you contain it? Uh, you know, the only way to contain is to close all borders, and that's clearly not feasible. But I would say a better control strategy is for people to continue to follow COVID appropriate behavior.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, that is something people seem to be very reluctant to do. So the situation we've reached now is that we have two variants which are spreading in India. The double mutant variant in Maharashtra, which you believe is the cause of the surge, and that surge will get worse. And clearly, once again, it may not be contained to Maharashtra, it could spread beyond the borders to other states. And then you have the UK variant, which has already reached community levels of spread in Punjab, but that too may not be containable in Punjab, and that too will spread to other states. So we have two worrying mutations spreading, which are A, more infectious, and one of which, the one in Maharashtra, is probably more resistant to vaccines. So altogether, Dr. Jameel, before I change subjects and go to something else, altogether, this is a worrying situation.
Yes, it is a worrying situation, and we should be really addressing it with a great deal of urgency and deploy all the tools that are available to us at this time. The two tools that are available to us at this time, one is COVID appropriate behavior, which each one of us can do. The second is increase the rate of vaccination.
I'll come to
Because
that in a
see,
moment's time.
even if these mutants reduce the effect of vaccines, they will still be able to prevent serious infection, serious disease, and mortality.
You know,
And this is data, global data.
Dr. Jameel, you began your answer by saying we need to address the situation with a great deal of urgency. Do you see that urgency in the way the government is responding?
I think so. I think so because now the government has opened up vaccination from yesterday to everyone above 45, no questions asked. But the government can make this policy. The government cannot go to the vaccination center and get vaccinated.
Absolutely. Let me
Vaccination is still optional.
Absolutely no, and it must stay optional because obviously something like vaccination cannot become compulsory. That would be unethical, and it will probably put people off even more. But I take your point. And I'll come to vaccination in a moment's time. I want to now move to a second issue of great importance. You hinted at it when you talked about the slow speed at which epidemiological work was being done to connect the mutant strain in Maharashtra to the situation on the ground. I want to talk to you about genome sequencing. On Tuesday at the press conference, the government officially confirmed that 11,064 samples have so far been genome sequenced in India. That's been separately calculated to be 0.1% of the total cases in India. Britain, as you know, is averaging 5%. Professor Ashish Jha, Brown University, told me the other day that America is averaging somewhere between 2 and 3%. Is 0.1% sufficient for a country with a population of 1.35 billion?
Well, I would put it a little differently. When the press conference was done on 24th, it said that this consortium, which is called INSACOG, has sequenced 11,000 samples. Before this, there were some 5,700 or 800 sequences that were already in public databases from various other sources. This 11,000 was done by a consortium which was established by an office order of the government in sometime in mid-January. It started functioning in mid-February. So the numbers we are really looking at are numbers for 1 month. The numbers we are looking at are numbers for total number of cases in India going from about 11 to 12 million. So I would say that these 11,000 are only out of 1 million. We cannot do a cumulative thing here because the samples that are coming into the consortium. So at that rate, let me just finish that, Karan. At that rate, the INSACOG is actually sequencing at 1%. 5% was a vision. 5% was an aspiration. We will get there. But 1% hitting the ground running with 1% ain't too bad right now.
Well, let me ask you this. First of all, that figure of 11,064 was put out by the government on the 30th, last Tuesday. So it hasn't changed very much between the 24th and the 30th, which is a whole week. But more importantly, my question is this.
No, it has changed. It's just that the government has not put out a real-time, briefing.
Well,
that number, I'm aware that the number has changed.
Forgive me, Professor Jameel, that's even worse. If the government is putting out information which is 6 days old and claiming that it is up to date, then the situation is even worse. You expect governments to be on top of the ball, not 6 days behind it. But leave that aside. Let's not worry about the actual number, which officially on the 30th was said to be 11,064. My question is a little different. Are we doing sufficient genome sequencing for a country which has officially recorded 12 million cases and whose population is 1.35 billion? Are we doing enough genome sequencing?
No, we're not doing enough. We need to do more. But, before February, the sequencing was not organized. Today, the sequencing is organized. There are 10 labs across the country that are sequencing day and night. So let's not hold those labs to something that was done 6 months back or not done 6 months back. Let's hold those labs to how they perform in the next 6 months.
Well, let me then ask you this. At this moment, how methodically is genome sequencing happening? Earlier, when we were talking about the double mutant in Maharashtra, you said there was a shortage of personnel. You also said that a lot of the personnel were not adequately trained. So
no. So that I was talking about healthcare workers on the ground whose job is to collect the metadata, whose job is to do this linkage. There are the 10 institutions that are doing sequencing. They have all the hardware, all the software, all the intellectual power to do the sequencing and to analyze the sequences. They have everything.
So the 10 laboratories have A, adequate levels of staff, and B, properly trained staff as well. You're confirming both.
Yes, so they have trained staff, they have equipment available, they have reagents available. The government has also released funds for them to get more staff and to get more reagents and to really increase it.
But first, I mean,
That's happening.
but do they at the moment have adequate staff, or are they short staffed in terms of what they have to do?
No, no, they have enough staff, but staff strength is being further spruced up so that analysis can be done very, very quickly.
You said the government is releasing further funds. Now, clearly, genome sequencing,
Has already released. It
when was
happened a few days back.
a few days ago,
Yes.
only a few days ago.
No, no. So they had funds already at their disposal, and the government has further given them funds. And I think the release happened 2 or 3 days back. The second tranche.
Until the release of money happened 2, 3 days ago, was genome sequencing adequately funded?
Yes, it was, because these institutions are also government institutions. They had funds at their disposal, which they were using with the promise that when the funds are released, they can make up for the shortfall.
So, two more questions about genome sequencing. You're saying to me that you have no problem, no concern with the way genome sequencing is happening, both in terms of quantity of staff and adequate training of staff, but also in terms of adequate funding. You have no problem in any of those areas with the way genome sequencing is happening.
Not at this time, no. At the genome sequencing effort is connected well, it's going well. We need to speed up the linking of the genome sequence to epidemiology, and that is a little slow at this time, but I'm sure that will pick up.
But that, in a sense, is also a worrying concern because you mentioned it earlier with specific regard to the double mutant in Maharashtra. If the linking up between the genome sequencing and the situation on the ground is not happening adequately fast, or sometimes not happening at all, then we're not getting the full benefit of the genome sequencing we're doing.
Yes, I agree with you, but see, even with genome sequencing, you can sort of get that answer, because let's say that in the month of March, out of, let's say, 10,000 sequences done, you find 15% double mutant. But in April, if you do, let's say, 100,000, 10,000 sequences, and the rate that you get is 30% or 50%, then you immediately know that the number is increasing. And therefore, uh, the surge is because of that. So,
Absolutely. That's not sadly reflected in what Dr. Balram Bhargav said on the 30th. You're saying it, and you're making a very sensible, logical point in saying it. But Dr. Bhargav said something very differently at the press conference. My last question on genome sequencing, is it getting the seriousness it deserves? Is it getting the importance it needs? I have a sense that you have certain hesitations and reservations, but you're not being upfront and critical because you don't want to dishearten the government. I get that feeling from your answers that you're
no,
holding.
that's not true, Karan. That's not true. I can tell you with full authority that over the past 1 month, 6 weeks actually, the level of effort that has been put in, and the results that it has generated, are really quite good. And in the times to come, you will see that this will get even better, because there is full commitment from scientists at these 10 labs. There is full commitment from the Department of Biotechnology, which is funding this effort. And there is full commitment from the highest levels of government to make sure that it works.
Okay.
I I mean, I cannot reveal all the details, but I can tell you that just yesterday there was a very high level meeting that took place, that took stock of the genome sequencing effort. Certain recommendations were made, and they are being put in place very, very quickly.
Okay, let's then move to a third issue that I want to discuss with you today. The serious questions that are being asked about the two vaccines that are used in India, Covaxin and Covishield. Let's start with Covishield. As you know, internationally, Covishield is known as AstraZeneca, but it is the same vaccine. And AstraZeneca is facing problems in Europe and America. Canada and France have decided not to give it to people under 55. Germany to people under 60, Sweden and Finland to people under 65, and Iceland to people under 70. These countries are apprehensive that there could be a connection between the AstraZeneca jab and some 35 or 40 people who've developed worrying blood clots after they got the jab. As a result, they've suspended it for certain age groups. Is that, in your eyes, wise and sensible caution, or is it an exaggerated, unjustified response?
It is exaggeration, it is scaremongering, uh, and even a respected magazine like The Economist had an article on it saying that Europe's cautiousness is going to cost the world dearly. Uh, the European regulator says it is safe. The WHO says it is safe. Uh, 30 cases of blood clots have not been linked to the vaccine. This is even less than random chance of blood clots happening in people.
Let me put it like this. As you know, AstraZeneca, which is called Covishield in India, is the main vaccine in our country.
Yes.
90% of the 67 million jabs given so far have been
Right.
Covishield, which means just over 60 million Covishield jabs have been given in India. Have we reported any instances of blood clotting or other serious adverse effects in India?
Not to my knowledge. And I also spoke to the person who heads the uh, adverse effects following vaccination task force. And he told me nothing has been seen. And I believe he has also gone on record to say that India has not seen any of this.
One question, because skeptics will ask this: do you believe that there are absolutely no blood clots or other serious adverse effects in India as a result of Covishield? Or, as many people suspect, is this something the government is hiding or fudging? I don't mean to be rude and offensive, but that is how Indian people think. That's why I'm asking it. Do you believe there are no blood clots, or do you suspect this is fudged and doctored?
No, I don't think it is fudged and doctored. India is too big a country to fudge and doctor things like this coming from multiple places in the country. Uh, I, you know, uh, yes, I do believe that it is a safe vaccine. It's an effective vaccine, unless I see data on blood clots. Uh, the vaccine is safe and good to go.
So, your advice.
Even European countries haven't produced the kind of data that you would like to see.
So, your
30 out of millions of doses that have been administered, and even those 30 are less than random chance of blood clots happening.
So, your advice to the audience listening to you and to the wider Indian audience beyond the one that we're reaching is: AstraZeneca, called Covishield in India, is safe. Do not be scared. Go out and take it. Do not get put off by the Germanys or the Frances or the other European countries.
Well, I would agree with that, and to bolster my argument, I would say that both my wife and I took Covishield on the 5th of March, and we are due for our second shot next week, and we're going to take it.
My last question now about Covaxin. As you know, the Brazilian regulator has refused to give Covaxin a good manufacturing practices certificate. It's raised concerns about sterilization and disinfection. More importantly, it's raised concerns about the extent to which the inactivated virus, which is used for the making of this vaccine, has actually been completely inactivated. Now, those are pretty serious allegations. Should the Indian regulator do an independent inquiry into these allegations?
Yes, I think the Indian regulator should do it, because if that is the case, and I don't know if it is, if that is the case, then it is just as bad for the Indian population as it is for the Brazilian population. Uh, I really don't think eventually it will pan out. I mean, Bharat Biotech has made multiple viral vaccines based on the inactivated viral vaccine platform. And this is something very, very elementary, uh, that, in vaccine manufacture, and, they're not, they are quite skilled people. They're not going to make such an elementary error.
So you're saying two things. You're saying, firstly, that it's hard to believe a company as experienced as Bharat Biotech
Right.
would have failed to completely inactivate a virus before using it to make a vaccine. It's hard to believe they'd have lapsed in this way.
Yeah. So from what I have read, Karan, I have seen no data coming from the Brazilian regulator that says that, the virus has not been fully activated. Based on their audit of the facility, they think that the virus may not be fully activated. Now, there's a world of difference between I think that it is like this or I know that it is like this.
I understand, and that's a very good point you're making. The fear is that if the virus that's used to make the vaccine is not completely inactivated, then that vaccine may not protect. It may actually endanger you and give you the disease instead. Tell me something. You're a virologist. I'm only asking a common sense question, so forgive me if it's a wrong one. But can one do a test of people who've had Covaxin, either one dose or both, and have then gone on to get COVID to see whether the COVID they've thereafter got is somehow linked to the genome sequence of the virus used in the vaccine? Can that test be done to prove or disprove this allegation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think you are more of a virologist than you think you are. Absolutely. If the genome sequence of the virus present in these people is the same as the genome sequence of the vaccine virus, then that is direct proof.
So then we can in India very easily test whether this allegation is true or not. All we have to do is to look at the 8 or 9 million people who were given Covaxin, see if any of them have gone on to get COVID, and if they have, check their genome sequence with the genome sequence of the virus used in the vaccine, and that will establish whether there's any connection or whether the allegation is simply false and wrong.
Yes. The virus sequence in the vaccine preparation should already be available with the regulator. That should be part of the dossier that is submitted to the regulator.
And I take it this is part of the process you believe when the regulator does an independent inquiry, the regulator should follow.
Yes, the regulator can do this. The other thing that the regulator can do is ask Bharat Biotech to submit a few different batches of the vaccine, which can go to a lab that does, virus culture, and see if there is any virus in that preparation that grows out in culture.
Quite right. So actually, the sort of independent inquiry that you believe a regulator should do can be done pretty easily. It's not a
It
complicated
can.
process.
It can. Yes.
My last question. As you know, we face a second surge. There are predictions which suggest that because the rise of the second surge seems to be faster than the rise of the first, the second surge could end up being worse than the first. Already we're increasing at over 81,000 a day. The first surge peaked at somewhere around 95, 96,000 a day. We're not far short of that. In that background, should we give emergency use clearance to vaccines like Johnson and Johnson, Novavax, and Sputnik without insisting they do their bridging studies first? If I recall correctly, Covishield was cleared without completing its bridging studies. Why should that not be a precedent for these three?
Now, I agree entirely with you. And these three, it's important because all three of these have manufacturing partners in India. All three of these have completed efficacy, And 2 out of these 3 have already been approved in other countries. Novavax has not received any approval outside in any country yet, but the other 2 have received approval, and the other 2 have manufacturing partners in India. So I really fail to understand at a time when the surge is happening, at a time when we may be short on vaccine supply because the government has also suspended the vaccine diplomacy or the vaccine Maitri program. Uh, and if we have more vaccines available, why limit it to people 45 and above? That's barely 25% of India. Open it up to everyone.
So
So
you're saying a second very important thing. In addition to giving emergency use clearance to the 3 vaccines I mentioned, 2 of which, as you say, are already being used in other countries, you're also saying open up vaccination to every adult over 18, remove the age barrier of 45.
yeah, and I think we have to be a little innovative in our approach here. There is no need to open vaccination to everyone in a state that is not seeing a surge. But opening it in Maharashtra, for example, in Punjab, in Karnataka, where there is certainly a surge happening, right? So the same policy doesn't have to be for the entire country. You have to have a need-based policy.
In other words, drop the age barrier in states where the situation is getting critical, like Maharashtra and Punjab, even if you're not prepared to drop it nationwide, but at least do it in these states immediately.
Right. And bringing other vaccines is going to strengthen our vaccine supply, so that doesn't remain the bottleneck in the whole process.
Now, Dr. Jameel, I know you're close to the government and they rely on your advice when it comes to genome sequencing. Have you shared this advice with them as well? And if you have, what response do you get? Are they willing to listen and hear, or do they
Well,
have set ways?
no, to be honest, I have not shared this advice with the government, but I have written about it. And I do hope that people who make these decisions also read.
I hope so too. Thank you very much, Professor Jameel, for this interview, in particular for explaining why the double mutant in Maharashtra is worrying and concerning, why you believe it is the basis of the surge in that state and why that surge could get worse, for also explaining that the UK variant has now achieved community spread levels in Punjab, and there's a danger that both these mutants could spread beyond Maharashtra and Punjab and endanger us. Thank you also for clarifying the situation about genome sequencing and how effectively it's been done. And finally, for clarifying those questions that concern many about Covaxin as well as Covishield. I'm very grateful for this comprehensive interview. Take care, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan. Always a pleasure.